Hey guys, I'm excited to have Andy Crestadina on our show from Orbit Media. And I don't know if you guys follow me on LinkedIn, but I shared an article that he wrote that was about influencer marketing for SEO and how to work with influencers for better content and higher search rankings. And so I had to have him on because Andy, you just had a different way of explaining it that made me kind of stop and think a little bit. And we all want to tap into like social influencers. And that's like,
Hmm.
the biggest trend alive.
Hmm.
Um, so what made you write that article?
Well, probably 10 years ago, I started doing collaborative content marketing, which we just called at the time just collaboration. And it was just reaching out to other creators, asking for contributor quotes, or doing roundups or interviews like this one. And then it all sort of converged and became very widely known as influencer marketing. Collaborative content marketing is just an organic form of influencer marketing. It's not paid where you buy,
Right.
paid influencer marketing is like advertising,
Yeah.
but content collaboration, reaching out to other people, learning from them, including them in your content. This is just it's something that we've done and for a long time. I've learned so much from it in my collaborations. I've made so many close friends and
Yeah.
connections. And so, yeah, it was something that I've always done. And I'm also a longtime SEO. So it was fun to help people understand and connect the dots between those kinds of collaborations and higher rankings.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I want to just say a couple things that I pulled from the article that really kind of hit home for me. One was that social influencers, a lot of them may not publish on their websites, right? Like
Hmm.
it's all socially related.
Correct.
And that only a small percentage of influencers, I'll say that 10 times, create content. And you said that's the 1% rule.
Hmm.
Um, and then this line is like the best ever. Social is temporary, search is forever. And I went, yes, that's so true.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people miss that. I think when people hear influencer marketing, they think of Instagram and they think of fashion, travel, and lifestyle, which is
Yep.
only a tiny subset of all influencer marketing, of course. It might be the part that you're exposed to most as sort of a consumer or just as a social media user. But B2B social media marketing is about thought leadership, about
Yeah.
expertise, about collaborating with experts, nothing to do with Instagram.
Yeah.
So, and Instagram is a great example of just how temporary and short lived some of the visibility can be. There's not even links in that stuff. I
I
mean, you're not going to
know.
get any traffic. It's not going to attract any subscribers. You might, so yes, a big part of Google's search ranking algorithm is links from other websites. If a website links to you, that's a vote of confidence from that website to yours, and
True.
that helps, improves your ranking potential for years to come. Uh, a tweet it just does not stay very visible
Gone.
for very long. So there's a big, what would you rather have? A link from an authoritative website
Mhm.
or a mention in someone's social media stream? It's an
Yeah,
easy question.
absolutely. And like share how influencer collaboration affects SEO.
Sure. So I'm writing an article, let's say what I'm working on now. What am I doing now? I'm writing an article about keywords and intent.
Mm,
So different keywords have different align with different types of intent. There's three main types of intent. So I know a guy who knows a lot about this. His name is Dan Shore. He actually runs a big podcast, a big SEO podcast called Experts on the Wire. I'm definitely going to reach out to Dan to get his insights to make this a better article.
mm,
Step one, I improve the quality of my article.
yeah.
That's not bad for search. Obviously, it's insufficient. The best articles don't necessarily rank, but I'm also building a relationship with a content creator. I'm reconnecting with Dan, haven't talked to him in a while. It's a funny example. Hey, Dan, if you hear this, thinking of you. But so having content that's worthy of being linked to,
Yep.
especially original research, because that supports other people's assertions, and relationships with people who create content. That's the 1% you mentioned. These are the bloggers, the editors, the journalists, the podcasters, the academic researchers, maybe the event producers. These people make links. They create URLs. Those URLs have content. That content may link back to you. So those are the two key ingredients for growing your site's domain authority without doing any kind of spammy SEO link
Hmm.
building or deliberate digital PR. I'm talking about link attraction. It works beautifully. You just need to have something worthy of being linked to and lots of relationships with content creators.
Right. I love that. And of course, what better way to create relationships than be a guest on shows and have guests on your shows?
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of podcasting personally. So
Of
how
course.
how can we leverage that a little bit more and make that the SEO and the influencer side kind of help?
Sure. Well, you know very well that one of the top outcomes and goals of podcasting is just networking, relationships, outreach. It makes you more relevant. It grows, it makes you, it builds a community around you, it leads to friendships, which is the best, right? That is a format that is like engineered for networking outcomes, which we just said is half the battle, right? Yeah. Link-worthy content and relationships with people with other creators. The other things that you can do just generally would be like, if you're a blogger, stop writing articles without contributor quotes. Never write an article without a contributor quote. Just put people in your stuff, put people in your content. It's also good for social media, by the way. I'm not at all down on social media. I'm super active on social media. And one of the outcomes I love from that is the networking and the relationships. And when you have people and faces and names in your content, in your articles, in your webinars, your podcasts, your blog posts, now you've got someone to mention when you share your content. So your content really isn't optimized for social media unless it has people and faces in it. And your network isn't built to grow links to your website and support your future rankings unless you're using your content as a networking tool to build relationships with other content creators.
That's powerful. Because I think a lot of people don't think of it that way. Like their brains aren't trained to kind of think though, like a couple steps ahead. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a diagram in that post you mentioned where I try to like walk backwards from a lead. To get a lead, you need two things: traffic and a conversion rate. To get traffic, social, search, or email, right? If we're talking about search, you need to rank. To rank, you need two things: authority and relevance. Authority is links to your website. To get links, you need two things. You need relationships with content creators, and you need content worthy of being linked to. So all I did in that piece, and talked about this sometimes in videos or in presentations at conferences, is connect all the dots.
Yeah.
And you realize that your leads in the future are based on your rankings, which are based on your links, which are based on your relationships with content creators. And it doesn't take long before you realize your content is a fantastic networking tool, Lyndsay, as you know.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But when you read something a different way and it just clicks, that's what your article did for me. And the way you laid it out, it's like the ankle bone's connected to the knee bone. It's like, you really got to
it is like that
through all those little steps.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I obviously think that podcasting is a great connecting tool, but never really thought about it on a broader scale to say that content, as networking and SEO. Now, I want to dive into SEO a little bit more because I know a lot of podcasters really struggle with this area on like using the podcast to create content on their website. Some even struggle with that. But then even further than that, how to SEO that post to help with the rankings. Can you kind of help step us through that a little bit?
Sure. So first, I think it's worth mentioning that that SEO is not just Google, and that some of the most valuable SEO for a podcaster would be to optimize the show to rank in iTunes or other discovery networks. So that's a big factor, separate from ranking in Google. Another thing that I would consider as a podcaster is looking at who ranks for the articles already written about podcasts, articles that are already ranking Google. This is like PR style SEO. Who writes the top podcasts for X topic? If you make friends, like that's someone to network with, because that person's going to update that article someday. And if your podcast appears on that list for that article that already ranks for that top podcast's topic, then that's called barnacle SEO. You've attached yourself to the thing that already is highly visible in search. You're going to need that relationship for that to happen. That doesn't happen by accident. That's regular straight PR. But the heart of your question was mostly about how do you make a URL on your website, a podcast show, like an episode, rank in Google search. That is, that has a special challenge with it, because the way that shows flow, they aren't necessarily deeply focused on a specific topic.
True.
What helps in Google is to make the best page on the internet for a topic. So if you can keep the show narrowly focused on one topic and create a post about it, right? Make it a URL, put the player at the top. But then the article itself, scanning through it, even if you never listened to the show, the article itself is justifiably, right, arguably one of the best pages on the internet for the topic. Like, you go that deep into it, and
Right.
anybody at a glance and the Google algorithm itself would look at that and say, this is an amazing article on the topic. Google doesn't care if it's a podcast, if it's a guide, if it's a how-to post or whatever. It's just a
Right.
URL. Google doesn't rank websites, it ranks pages. So it's all just about that URL. So you really have to basically add your podcast to long form, deep content, totally focused on a specific target key phrase, incorporate all the related phrases, just use all SEO best practices related to the show, related to, within the piece, within the URL. So the transcription can help. It probably needs a bunch of work. To morph a trend. I've tried before.
I find it hard to work with the transcript.
So hard. I've tried that too. I used to do webinars for a big SEO company, SEMrush, and they'd send me the transcript and say, let's try to optimize this for a phrase. And you go through it, it's like very dense paragraphs, which don't work well in, it's not a digital content best practice. It's just not easy to adapt them in that way. I would basically embed the podcast on a page that goes way into a topic at sort of astonishing detail on that. Like, that's what works in search. On the other hand, there's one other thing that might work for you, Lyndsay, which is optimizing these posts to rank for the guest's name.
Right.
People search for people all the time.
Absolutely.
And so if you can make that piece a really strong piece just about that person, like if you're really profiling them and you've got a lot of answers and to questions and about their background, and it just, your page is a strong page on the topic of the guest, it could very well get visibility from that. Maybe not all of them, but a subset of those posts for those shows that you do on those people may have a lot of durable visibility and get views and listens for years.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I guess it depends on, like you said, how niche down your topic is. And what show notes that you're going to get out of it or information. And same with if the person is like a well-known person that you can tap into their influence, people are searching their name. For some clients I've gone, okay, that person used their name, not the topic. Because it just makes sense. So like, I know you need show notes, but you're saying go even deeper than the show notes or what was covered in the podcast, but to go the extra mile and have more content written to speak to that topic specifically. So for instance, having you on, would it make sense to have, an article that you've written, like almost like have a guest blog kind of built in on that topic?
Yeah. So let's say this, we turn this podcast into a show about, an article about, organic influencer marketing for podcasters. That's a niche topic for which is probably not tons of competition. I'd have to do some analysis to check. It takes a few minutes to figure out if you have a reasonable chance of ranking. But if that became the title, if that went into the header, and if the body text of that article was of a similar length to the other pages that rank for that phrase, if it went into similar detail, answered the related questions, touched on all the related subtopics, to do that, you might want to grab chunks of the article that we've been talking about from my site, put some of the images on there, invite me to link back to that from my piece, which I could easily do, right? If you're a podcaster, click here to, conversation Andy had with Lyndsay about the relevance to podcasters. So yeah, you're going to take excerpts from other things and go deeper into the topic. It's going to have subheads. It's going to have a couple hundred words. It's not just show notes. Show notes are usually just links. I mean, Google doesn't care if it's a show note or an article, but the point is Google rewards deep text-based content that provides thorough information on the given topic. So that's kind of that's table stakes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And because I've seen so many different styles of show notes or podcast
Mm,
post pages. Some
mhm.
have, bullet points, some a written summary, some the transcripts, which I'm not a fan of. I do love the timestamps because it's easy to click on a link and
Yeah.
listen to a portion of it.
Mhm.
So I guess it like would it depend on your goal? Because some people are more focused on like making sure that someone engages with the podcast and listens. So those timestamps are really helpful. I guess some people are more focused on the SEO part of it, so need that rich content in there to rank. Like, are there rules of like what you should do when?
Well, I love that question because it saves the listener to this episode, like the potential loss of a lot of time doing a little bit of SEO on a bunch of stuff. I would not do a little bit of SEO on a bunch of stuff. SEO is really about, is this URL one of the 10 best pages on the internet? If it's not a phrase people are searching for, if it's never going to it's never going to be as deep as those other
Mhm.
pages, then free yourself of the consideration. Like, don't worry about it. Forget SEO. Just maybe it's a small set. Maybe it's like 1 in 10 shows that you do are things where you did a little bit of keyword research. You see that you have a chance of ranking. The guest is going to go deep into that topic and you make that page, right? Or you turn some of your old shows into long form articles in a different place on your site, right? So it's not really about the podcast or not a podcast or what is this. So there's no such thing as sprinkling keywords around. There's no such thing as a little, everything's a little bit optimized. No,
Yeah.
it really, all that matters is that you made what is, like, if Google was the judge and your audience was the jury, you could say, this is clearly one of the best pages on the internet. It's an obsession with quality that the best SEOs have. They're, when I, and only maybe half of the article, I'm a 20-year SEO, but it's only maybe half of the articles I write that are even seriously optimized. The other ones,
Yeah.
who cares? Who cares? I'm not worried about it.
Right.
But the ones that I am optimizing, I am like deliberately working my butt off, spending 10 plus hours to make one of the best pages on the internet.
Mm,
That's the obsession. Because if it's the 50th best page on the internet, who cares? It's going to be on page 5 in Google.
right.
There's no trick to it where you
Yeah.
just have to go all in or don't go. It's really
Yeah.
liberating once you realize that.
No, that is super helpful because like as content creators, it's easy to feel like you have to do everything all of the
Mm-mm.
time. And it's
No,
like
yeah,
you're like, oh my
it's
God, how am I
exhausting.
possibly going to get this
No,
done?
yeah,
And then an arm and a leg to like contract out for everything.
no, yeah,
It can feel a lot. So that actually was extremely valuable and that, pick and choose your battles, so to
yeah.
speak.
Absolutely, so important. I feel terrible. It's like journalists 15 years ago, their editors came and told them everything's got to be optimized. Like, what? This is a news piece. No one's searching. This is not that's not what this is
Right.
about. Or my friend who has a greeting card site, and she said, I want to rank for birthday cards. So I put the word birthday on 25 pages. What? Like, no, that's not. Just, if you want to rank for a phrase, ask yourself, what is the best URL on your website for that phrase? Now go look at that page and ask yourself, is this legitimately one of the best pages online for the
Yeah.
phrase? Like, if not, if you don't answer yes to both those questions, then promote your content through other channels. There's
Yeah.
more to life than search.
Yeah. Or just have a different goal for that page. And it's to
Yeah,
have call to actions on it, have
yeah.
whatever the timestamps, get people to engage in the content. And
And if you collaborated with an influencer on it, or it was an interview piece, promotion's partly built in. It's not like you're completely ignoring content promotion.
yeah.
You're collaborating, which is half the battle anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much for simplifying things. You have like a way with explaining stuff. I don't know what it is, but it helps.
I'm glad. I'm still learning myself every day. Right before this call, I was working on a YouTube description, asking myself some of these same questions. Like, is
Yeah.
this thing ever going to show up anyway? Why am I trying so hard on this description? It's like a show notes thing, right?
I
So
know,
I
totally.
I feel you, and I don't know that there's a right answer. Thanks
I
for the
know.
encouraging words, but we all struggle with these things.
Yeah. But again, like when we're so overwhelmed, and especially the listeners and podcasters, people that are new in the space, just to have that overwhelm kind of like, whoo, okay, and
Mm,
simplify it with terms that we can actually understand and follow. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So how can people, I'll obviously have a link to the original article that made me stalk you and find you and have you on my
Sure.
podcast. But how can people find more about you and how you can help them with SEO?
Well, my company Orbit Media is a web design company, so we don't really do SEO as a
Mm,
separate service.
you're just really good at it.
It's how we, yeah, it's just something
Yeah.
it's a problem I've had my whole life, right? Or my whole career. No, but orbitmedia.com is where I write an article every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So if you want to see the latest in our thinking or see a step-by-step process with screenshots for some of the more interesting, complex, effective digital strategies, sign up at Orbit Media and you'll get an article from me once every 2 weeks. That's our frequency. And I don't think I need more than that. I'm kind of tired. It's hard to do these things. Every article is like a 10-hour content project. So I
You
feel
are a
like that's
master
just,
content creator. I have to tell you, kudos
well,
to you. Yeah. So out there, read what Andy writes, watch what he says. You definitely have a lot of insight to offer. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
thanks for having me on. This
Yeah.
was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks.